So,
Hi.
what do you think? Do you think Boris has had a good 2 years overall, if you looked at the big picture?
Well, I think it's been a very mixed bag, and I think the jury's still out, really, Nana. I mean, you are absolutely right, of course, to talk about that considerable achievement, considerable technical and constitutional achievement in succeeding in finishing the job of getting Brexit done. And I don't think that we should easily forget that, because if you recall the previous 3 years before Boris won that election and before he became Prime Minister, the awful state of the country in terms of the rows between Remainers and Brexiteers, which seemed to permeate every part of our life, and the fact that, bizarrely, the policy that the majority of people had voted for was being thwarted on all counts, from the judiciary, from the opposition, from the media. And so I think to drive that through, it cannot be forgotten about. That was a considerable achievement. However, I suppose one of the problems with the idea of getting Brexit done is that once you've got past that hurdle of achieving that constitutional step, there are debates about what it means for our domestic policy agenda, our foreign policy agenda. And I mean, here I think we get into much more sort of cloudy territory as to what we can describe as a success or otherwise. And obviously on top of that, then we've had this huge event in the shape of the COVID pandemic. So I think it's a very complicated picture. But if, like me, you wanted the Brexit success to lead to a kind of radical policy agenda, and we've heard a lot of talk about that, we've heard about levelling up, but I think at the moment it's very hard to see how that's really effectively been rolled out. It's still in gestation, I guess.
If you were to pick a sort of the top Boris moment and a good moment, which one would you pick?
Well, I think I've already articulated that. I think actually achieving getting out of Europe was that moment, but I just don't feel that that's been successfully or that we've properly built on that yet. Now, as I say, that has an awful lot to do with events unforeseen in the shape of the pandemic came along. And you were right, of course, to refer to the vaccine rollout and how successful that has been in this country. And it shouldn't be forgotten that one of the reasons for that success is that we were free of a lot of the red tape and restrictions that being within the European Union would have required of us. So I think that all of that can be seen as part of the same project.
What about his worst moment then?
Well, I think it's not so much a moment. I think it's more a question of drift. But there was a lot of promise arising out of Brexit for putting Britain on a different footing in terms of its international reputation, and creating within the country a kind of less restricted, red tape sort of economic climate, making us more competitive, establishing things like free ports, of which there's been some discussion, but it hasn't really been properly enacted yet. I think perversely what we've seen, and this is largely as a result of COVID, is that all this idea that Britain was going to become nimble and competitive and perhaps have lower taxes, whilst also addressing some of those deep social issues that were raised as a result of the Brexit vote and this idea of levelling up, that actually we're moving towards a society which seems to be more highly taxed, more regulated, and in many ways resembles those societies within the European Union that we left that organisation in order to avoid.